Most people think building wealth is about picking the right ETF, timing the market, or squeezing out an extra 2% in returns, but that's not where people actually win or lose. In fact, the majority of investors are obsessing over the wrong variable entirely. The difference between retiring rich and retiring broke isn't your returns. It's whether you survive the first phase. Because wealth doesn't fail at the advanced level of investing knowledge. It fails much earlier, during a stage where nothing seems to work and effort produces almost no visible progress. And that creates a strange reality. Two people can understand investing equally well, follow the same advice, buy the same funds, and still end up in completely different financial lives. Not because one knew more, but because one made it through the phase where knowledge doesn't translate into results yet. Maybe you've been investing for a couple of years now. You're doing what you're supposed to do, putting money in every month, skipping upgrades, saying no to trips you could technically afford. And yet when you open your account it shows something like $30,000 or $40,000, and it barely feels different from last year. The number moves, but not in a way that changes your life. Meanwhile, people around you who save nothing seem to be living better right now, eating out more, traveling more, upgrading faster. So it starts to feel like you're trading real enjoyment today for a future that doesn't look any closer. The math isn't broken. You're just in the invisible phase of wealth, the period where effort accumulates but outcomes don't register yet. I call these the invisible years, and almost every long-term investor goes through them, but most people quit before they realize what stage they're actually in. Most people start investing believing the outcome will be decided by intelligence. They compare ETFs, watch market forecasts, argue about whether 10% or 8% average return is realistic, and spend hours trying to optimize allocation, because it feels like that's where wealth is determined. But early on, almost none of that meaningfully changes your trajectory. In the first stage of building wealth, the dominant variable isn't performance, it's input. Returns only multiply existing capital, and when the capital base is small, even excellent returns produce trivial progress. Think about two investors over the same decade. Person A manages to achieve a fantastic 15% annual return but only contributes $200 a month. Person B is average, earning 7%, nothing impressive, but consistently contributes $1,000 every month. 4 years, Person B pulls ahead by a margin that feels unfair. Not because they were smarter, not because they predicted markets better, but because they kept feeding the system enough mass for compounding to eventually matter. In the early years, your portfolio grows mostly from deposits disguised as growth. The market isn't carrying you yet, you're carrying the market. Which flips the usual belief. At the beginning, investing success isn't a performance competition. It's a durability competition. Early investing is not a market game. It's a savings endurance game, and the people who last long enough are the ones who later look like they had a superior strategy. What actually changes around $100,000 isn't magic, and it isn't that the market suddenly starts rewarding you. What changes is the phase your money exists in. Wealth grows in stages, and each stage follows different rules. The first is the manual phase. This is where almost all progress comes from you. Your deposits dominate the account. The market barely contributes. If you stop pushing, nothing moves. Every gain feels small because relative to your effort, it is small. Then you enter the assisted phase. This is where your money starts helping you push. Not replacing you yet, but meaningfully reducing how hard each additional dollar feels to earn. A normal market year now produces an amount you actually notice. You open the account and the change isn't symbolic anymore, it's functional. Finally comes the autonomous phase, where growth no longer depends primarily on contributions. The portfolio produces more movement on its own than you add manually. At that point, time becomes more important than effort. The reason the $100,000 level matters is not because it's a perfect number, but because for most savers it's the first point where gains transition from invisible to perceptible. Psychologically, it proves the system works. Mathematically, returns become large enough relative to contributions to alter the growth curve. Nothing special happens to the market at 100,000. Something happens to the relationship between your effort and your results. There's a belief almost everyone carries into adulthood. I'll start investing seriously once I earn more. Right now is temporary, later I'll have margin, later I'll save aggressively. But in practice, income growth rarely increases your investing percentage, it mostly increases your comfort baseline. As income rises, expectations rise with it. The apartment improves, the car payment appears, subscriptions accumulate, convenience replaces effort, and what used to feel optional quietly becomes normal. The number going into your account grows, but the fraction that stays yours doesn't. This is why many high earners still feel financially stuck. Their savings rate never actually changes, it just scales sideways with their lifestyle. Early habits don't disappear when income increases, they harden. If you save 10% when you earn little, you'll probably save around 10% when you earn a lot, just expressed through bigger numbers. The dangerous part is psychological. You believe progress is waiting in the future while your structure guarantees the future will look like the present. Your first lifestyle determines your entire financial life, because it sets the ratio between consumption and ownership long before the income becomes meaningful. So if returns aren't the main driver early on, what actually determines how fast your life changes? Your savings rate, the percentage of what you earn that you keep, is the real engine of early wealth. Imagine 3 people earning similar incomes but living differently. The first saves about 10% of what they make. At that pace, reaching $100,000 can easily take around 12 years. The second saves 20%. Nothing extreme, just more intentional spending, and suddenly the timeline compresses to roughly 7 years. The third structures their life to keep 40%. Not through suffering but through design. Stable housing choices, controlled fixed costs, delayed upgrades. Now the timeline collapses to 3 or 4 years. Notice what changed. Not intelligence, not investment skill, not market luck. Only the portion of income retained. And this is where the counterintuitive part appears. People spend enormous effort chasing higher returns, but mathematically, doubling your savings rate early on accelerates wealth far more than doubling your investment performance ever could. A portfolio with little capital cannot compound meaningfully regardless of return, but a portfolio fed aggressively gains mass fast enough for compounding to activate. In other words, in the beginning you don't optimize growth by improving investments, you optimize growth by improving ownership. That single shift is usually the difference between someone who waits a decade to feel progress and someone who crosses the threshold while motivation is still alive. The reason this stage feels so discouraging isn't lack of discipline. It's a mismatch between how money grows and how the human brain evaluates progress. Effort is immediate but reward is delayed. You deposit money today and your life looks identical tomorrow, so the brain interprets the action as ineffective. Dopamine responds to visible feedback, and early compounding produces almost none, so motivation decays even while the math is working perfectly. On top of that, we naturally think linearly. More effort should equal proportionally more result. But early investing is non-linear, years of input accumulate before they express themselves. So psychologically it feels like pushing against nothing even though you're building stored momentum. That's why people quit right before the curve bends. The first 100,000 isn't hard financially, it's hard neurologically. You're fighting a perception problem, not a math problem. If that's true, the solution isn't complicated optimization, it's structural protection. First, freeze your lifestyle after every raise. Let income rise but hold your baseline steady so progress actually compounds. Second, automate increases annually so improvement happens without relying on willpower. And third, protect the investing streak itself. The consistency matters more than precision, because uninterrupted participation is what carries you out of the invisible phase into the part where results finally reinforce behavior. Picture a heavy flywheel sitting still on the ground. At the beginning every push feels wasted. You lean your weight into it and it barely moves, so your brain assumes the system isn't working. What you can't see is that each push is being stored as momentum. The mistake most people make is stopping right before the stored energy becomes visible motion. They interpret the silence as failure and walk away at the exact moment the machine is about to turn on. The investors who later looked disciplined weren't more motivated, they simply stayed long enough for effort to convert into inertia. And once inertia takes over, the relationship flips. Progress stops coming from how hard you push and starts coming from how fast it's already spinning. Wealth doesn't start when you make money. Wealth starts when money starts replacing effort. And understanding that shift explains a strange modern phenomenon. People earning high incomes who still feel financially stuck, which is what we'll break down next.